It all started like any other afternoon in the small town of Glenridge. The sun was out, the lunch rush was winding down, and Sarah, a 26-year-old waitress at a roadside diner, was wiping down tables and checking on the last few customers. She'd worked there for 3 years, always polite, always professional, and well-liked by the regulars. But that day took a turn no one saw coming. Within minutes, her life would be flipped upside down, all because of 2 officers who let power go to their heads. As Sarah stepped outside during her break to take a quick call, a black SUV pulled up beside her. Out stepped 2 police officers with stern faces and no explanation. She barely had time to ask what was going on before one of them grabbed her by the arm. Confused and scared, she tried to stay calm, asking over and over what the problem was. But instead of answering, they slapped cold handcuffs around her wrists and pushed her against the car. Passers-by slowed their steps, unsure if they were witnessing a mistake or something worse. The only thing Sarah knew for sure, this wasn't about anything she had done. The cops said little. Their tone was sharp, their attitude condescending. It wasn't until they made a comment under their breath, something about knowing her type, that it became painfully clear this wasn't about a crime. This was personal, about appearance, about judgment, about power. And Sarah, a young woman who'd grown up being told to trust the police, suddenly found herself at the mercy of 2 men who didn't even ask for her name. But here's what they didn't know. Sarah wasn't just any waitress. She had a past most wouldn't believe, one she'd kept quiet about for years. And as they locked her in the back of the cruiser and started talking over her head, she made one quiet call on her smartwatch. A single call, to a number no one expected, the Pentagon. Within minutes, the air changed. What happens when the people you underestimate have connections that stretch far beyond your reach? How do you explain away your actions when you're no longer in control of the situation? And who really holds the power when the tables turn? The cops thought they were dealing with someone invisible, someone powerless. But Sarah wasn't just fighting for herself. She was about to expose something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. And their careers? Well, let's just say they never saw the end coming. Stay tuned. You're going to want to hear what happens next. Back in the patrol car, Sarah sat still, her wrists tight in the cuffs and her heart racing. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She just stared out the window, thinking, calculating. The number she'd called had gone straight through. No rings, no delays. Just a calm voice on the other end that simply said, asterisk where on it. Asterisk, that was all she needed to hear. But to the 2 officers in the front seat, she still looked like a nobody. Just another waitress from a rundown part of town. And they carried on, laughing quietly, making smug comments that only added to the weight in her chest. What they didn't know, what almost no one in town knew, was that Sarah had once been part of a classified communications team working with a defense contractor. She had clearance, she had training. But after a mission overseas left her shaken, she walked away from it all and started fresh. New name, new life, no attention, just quiet. She didn't want medals or praise. She just wanted peace. The kind of peace that comes from pouring coffee, chatting with regulars, and watching sunsets over quiet roads. That dream, though, was unraveling fast. As the squad car pulled away from the diner, her co-workers watched helplessly through the window. One of them, a dishwasher named Miguel, started filming the scene with shaky hands. He'd seen Sarah help strangers, buy meals for people short on cash, even cover shifts when she was dead tired. Seeing her treated like this, like a criminal, didn't sit right. And the longer he recorded, the more obvious it became that this wasn't about justice. This was about profiling, about assumptions, and something felt deeply wrong. Meanwhile, the officers made no calls to dispatch. No mention of an arrest, no reading of rights, just silence, as if they didn't want the stop to be official, as if they thought no one would question them. That was their biggest mistake. Because 20 miles away, at a secure operations center, A red alert had already gone off. The name Sarah used for that call wasn't one just anyone could use. It was tied to deep protocols and high-level clearance. And now, a team of people in suits and headsets were pulling up satellite feeds, tracking the cruiser, and piecing together the timeline. They knew Sarah. More importantly, they owed her. Back in town, Miguel was still at the diner, pacing, phone in hand. He'd called the local station. They claimed no arrest had been logged under Sarah's name. That was the final red flag. He posted the full video online with a message. Asterisk, she never made it to the station. This isn't right. Help us find her. Asterisk, within minutes, it exploded across social media, pulling attention from local activists, legal groups, even a retired federal agent who recognized Sarah's face from years ago. In the woods, the tension built. Blake and Raina moved her toward an old maintenance shed, one barely standing, covered in vines. Inside, it was dark and empty except for a rusted chair and old equipment. Blake's voice was low. "This is where it ends." But before they could move closer, a low rumble echoed in the distance. Helicopter blades, distant but growing louder. Both officers froze. Sarah didn't flinch. She just looked at them and said, calm and steady, "You picked the wrong target." The sound of the helicopter grew louder, blades cutting through the evening sky like a warning shot. Officer Rayner's eyes darted upward. Blake stepped back, hand on his weapon, scanning the tree line. Neither expected backup, especially not from the air. Sarah stood her ground in the center of the shed, her wrists still cuffed, but her voice clear. "You're out of time," she said. "They're not just here for me, they're here for you." But then came the twist no one saw coming. The helicopter wasn't military. It wasn't law enforcement either. As it hovered above the clearing, a rope ladder dropped, but no one descended. Instead, a small drone detached and flew straight toward the shed, scanning the area. Blake fired a warning shot into the trees, panic overtaking strategy. The drone backed off, hovering in place like it was waiting. Sarah's eyes narrowed. That wasn't her team's drone. And that ladder, it wasn't standard issue. She knew those codes. Whatever was up there wasn't part of her call to the Pentagon. Then her watch vibrated again, 3 quick pulses. A new message flashed on the screen. Asterisk abort. Unknown aircraft. Possible interception. Stay low. Asterisk, her stomach dropped. Someone else was listening. Someone who had intercepted the emergency signal. That's when it all started making sense. Her clearance file wasn't just dormant. It was marked asterisk, sensitive compartmentalized asterisk, which meant someone had sealed it away for a reason. Someone who didn't want her found. Her disappearance might have suited them just fine. If she vanished in some rural woods, buried under a false story, who would question it? Rayner's voice cracked. This wasn't the deal. We were supposed to hand her off. His words hit like a jolt. Hand her off to who? Blake turned to him, furious. "Shut up. You've said too much already." Sarah's mind raced. These men weren't acting alone. They weren't just road cops on a power trip. They were the middlemen, part of something deeper. Someone higher up was pulling the strings, and whoever it was had just sent a private team to make sure the truth stayed buried. She backed up slowly, inching toward the broken wall at the rear of the shed. If she could get free, if she could reach open ground, her chances would rise. But the danger wasn't just behind her anymore. It was above, watching, and closing in. And in that moment, Sarah realized the conflict wasn't just about injustice or corruption. It was about secrets, government secrets, ones she thought she'd left behind, but that were never truly gone. The shed trembled slightly as the helicopter shifted overhead. Dust floated down from the ceiling, catching the last rays of light. Sarah kept her back to the wall, eyes locked on the officers, every muscle tight with focus. Blake stepped forward, gun still drawn, barking orders to Rayner, who looked like he was about to bolt. But Sarah didn't wait. With one swift motion, she drove her heel into the weak panel behind her, shoving it out and ducking through the opening. A bullet cracked past her shoulder, but she didn't stop. She ran into the tall grass, heart pounding, still cuffed but moving fast. Behind her, shouts echoed. Raina hesitated, but Blake rolled after him, chasing her deeper into the woods. The drone zipped back into the air, circling above like a hunter. But then, from the other side of the clearing, a second helicopter appeared, military-grade, fast and silent. It descended in one sharp movement, and within seconds, black-clad operatives stormed the ground. Real tactical officers, real government agents. Blake froze. He knew immediately who they were. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands, but it was too late. They had everything they needed. Two agents took him down hard, securing his wrists as another swept toward Raina, who barely got a word out before being cuffed and dragged back to the clearing. Sarah collapsed near the edge of the field, gasping for breath. One of the agents approached, unlocked her cuffs, and gently helped her sit up. "We've got you," he said. "Safe now." As they escorted her toward the chopper, another agent handed her a tablet. It was a live feed, footage from the drone. But not just from today. It showed a folder of evidence collected over months. Videos, voice recordings, payments. Blake and Raina were part of a ring funneling people to black sites under fake charges, all under the protection of a shell contractor with deep connections. Her name had popped up because she'd once unknowingly uncovered part of the system during her last deployment. That's why she was marked. They were never trying to silence her for what she did. They were afraid of what she might remember. But as she prepared to board the chopper, something caught her eye. A shadow moved in the tree line, someone watching. A face she hadn't seen in years. Daniel's, her old handler. He didn't approach. He just gave her a look and disappeared into the trees. And in that moment, Sarah knew the game wasn't over. She'd won this round, but something darker still lingered in the background. Watching, waiting. She was safe for now. But some secrets didn't want to stay buried. Back at the airbase, everything finally slowed down. Sarah sat in a quiet room, sipping coffee from a paper cup, her hands finally steady. Her wrists were sore from the cuffs, and her clothes still smelled like grass and dust, but she was safe. The officers who had taken her were now in federal custody, facing a long list of charges, from unlawful detainment to conspiracy and abuse of authority. Their careers were over. And more than that, their exposure triggered a deeper investigation that would stretch beyond Glenridge into other towns where similar abuses had gone unchecked for too long. Miguel's video had become a rallying cry online. News outlets picked it up, and by morning, Sarah's name was trending, not as a suspect, but as a hero. She never asked for the attention, but the truth had found its way out. Activists, journalists, and everyday people saw her story as a wake-up call about racial profiling, corruption in law enforcement, and the power of everyday people to speak up. The key words in the headlines said it all. * wrongful arrest, waitress falsely accused, cops exposed, hidden government secrets, woman's Pentagon call saves her life *. Sarah gave a quiet statement to the press, but avoided the spotlight. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted her life back. The diner, the customers, her routine. It was strange walking into the diner a few days later, everyone clapping and hugging her like she was someone famous. To them, she was more than just a server now. She was a fighter who stood up for herself and, unknowingly, for others too. The government gave her the option to re-enter the intelligence fold. They offered security, relocation, even a new identity. But Sarah declined. She'd had enough of secrets and shadows. What she wanted was something real, peace, honesty, and a town where people watched out for each other. Still, that moment in the woods haunted her. The look on Daniel's face, the way he vanished like he had never been there. It left a thread hanging, a reminder that while some battles were won, the larger war against corruption, hidden power, and silence wasn't over. But as Sarah stood outside the diner that evening, watching the sunset over the quiet town she fought to protect, She felt something she hadn't in a long time: control. And in that stillness, she realized the real power wasn't in her clearance or her training. It was in her voice, her courage, her refusal to be invisible. And now, everyone could see her. But back in that car, the clock was still ticking. The officers were taking her somewhere. Not the station, somewhere else. And Sarah could feel it. This wasn't just a bad stop. It was something darker. And as she stared down at the scratched door handle in front of her, one thought kept looping in her mind. Asterisk, they have no idea what they've done, asterisk. The cruiser rolled down a back road that didn't lead to any station. Sarah noticed the turns, the way they passed the town's edge and kept going. She'd lived here long enough to know where every road ended. This one led to an old, unused service road near the woods, a place people usually avoided. Her breathing stayed steady, but her mind was racing. Why were they bringing her here? What were they planning? She didn't have answers yet, but one thing was clear: this wasn't routine. Officer Blake, the older one with the heavy build, adjusted his mirror and glanced back at her. His partner, a younger guy with sharp features and restless energy, kept fidgeting, glancing at his phone like he was waiting on something. Sarah caught it. A message flashed quickly on his screen before he turned it face down. It wasn't police work. It wasn't official. Whatever this was, it felt personal and off the books. Back in town, Miguel was pacing outside the diner, still holding his phone. The video he took was already being passed around. Customers were talking. A local teacher shared it on social media with a caption: "Call Waitress didn't deserve this." Within an hour, the clip was gaining attention. A lawyer who happened to be in town for the weekend picked it up and recognized something was wrong, not just with the arrest, but the total lack of proper protocol. Meanwhile, in the operations center outside D.C., an alert chain had been triggered. Not because of Sarah's arrest, but because of her emergency code. It wasn't just a number. It was a specific phrase she used on the call that flagged something deeper. Her clearance wasn't expired. It was dormant, and that made it even more dangerous for those who tried to bury her past. A man named Daniels, former handler, now working in internal security, got the ping, and when he saw Sarah's name, he didn't wait. "She's been compromised," he told his team. "Track her. Now." Back in the cruiser, Sarah noticed they were slowing down. The road was thinning, gravel crunching under the tires. Her wrists hurt, but she ignored the sting. She was waiting for her moment. She didn't know if backup was minutes away or hours, but she knew one thing: she couldn't count on these men to play by any rules. And then the younger cop finally spoke. "You shouldn't have made that call," he said, his voice flat. "Now you've made things complicated." He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, Sarah understood. This wasn't just about her past or her job or even her identity. It was about something bigger she'd walked away from, and someone didn't want it coming back to light. The cruiser stopped at the edge of a clearing, just where the road faded into tall grass and trees. The sun was starting to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows over the forest. Sarah could feel the shift in the air. It was quiet, too quiet. No cars, no radio chatter, just the hum of the engine cooling and the sound of boots crunching gravel as the officers stepped out. They didn't say a word as they opened her door. Officer Blake kept one hand near his holster as he reached for her arm, while the younger one, Officer Rayner, watched the tree line like he expected something to appear. Sarah didn't resist. She let them guide her out, her eyes scanning the area. No cameras, no witnesses. This was no accident. Whatever was about to happen, they wanted it far from public view. "You shouldn't have gotten people involved," Blake muttered, gripping her arm tighter. "You should have just stayed quiet." He glanced at Rayner, who gave a small nod. They had a plan. But what they didn't know was that Sarah's message had reached more than just her old contacts. It had triggered a full internal sweep. Backgrounds, surveillance footage, digital traces. And these two officers were already under review. not just for this incident, but for several questionable stops, most of them involving women of color, undocumented workers, and low-income residents. Sarah's call had brought light to a pattern no one had bothered to investigate before. As Blake pushed her forward, Sarah stumbled slightly, just enough to lower her body and press her smartwatch against her side. A soft vibration pulsed. The signal had reached the satellite. Coordinates were live. They'd know her exact location, but would they get there in time?